Ever since the release of Dragon Slayer in 1984, the action RPG genre has grown by leaps and bounds throughout the decades. Various subgenres and franchises have been born, each presenting their own compelling combat loops and gameplay systems. Let's take a look at 30 of the best action RPGs of all time. Dark Souls Remastered. More than a decade after its original release, it's still impressive how much Dark Souls has influenced gaming. Dark Souls Remastered is a fairly straightforward enhanced edition, providing a 60 FPS frame rate, higher resolutions, and improved lighting and alpha effects, among other minor improvements. But the core of the title, from the excellent pacing and pitch-perfect design, the madness of levels like Sen Fortress and Blighttown, and the wonder upon finding an Orlando remain to this day, as does the solid combat and boss design. Dark Souls 3. As a culmination of the series, the combat in Dark Souls 3 offers a fine balance between the original and Bloodborne. Its bosses range from iconic to notorious, even if a few, like Wolnir, are kind of a bust. The build variety is strong, with a variety of light and heavy weapons, ranged weapons, spells, miracles, and much more, prompting multiple playthroughs, and there are a number of secrets and interesting sights to discover. Whether as an ending to the series or as a compelling action RPG in its own right, Dark Souls 3 is still a must-play. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. CD Projekt Red's magnum opus has received tons of praise for its storytelling and characters, not to mention the quest and world design. Its combat was a different story, though, and it didn't help that Bloodborne released around the same time. Nevertheless, what started out as a somewhat clunky system of light and heavy slashes soon evolves into a compelling slash-a-thon with a good amount of Witcher sets to unlock, potions and bombs with varying effects and bloody executions that looked fantastic. The Ascent. Set in the futuristic world of Velez, The Ascent immediately makes a strong impression with its cyberpunk aesthetics and dystopian leanings. As a former worker of the Ascent group, which has mysteriously collapsed, you must halt rival groups and factions from overtaking the arcology using a variety of weaponry, cybernetic abilities, and cover-based shooting. Though fairly rote at first, the combat opens up significantly, providing a decent amount of build customization and plenty of ways to jib enemies. Diablo 3. To say that Diablo 3 was a mess at launch would be putting it lightly. Nevertheless, Blizzard would heavily revamp the loot, difficulty, progress, and design, resulting in one of the finest looters to date. Each class, from the Demon Hunter to the Necromancer, offers a unique range of abilities and playstyles, while the smooth and responsive combat is addictive. Even if its endgame isn't the most in-depth, you'll still lose dozens of hours pushing greater rifts and min-maxing your favorite build. Path of Exile. Path of Exile started out as a spiritual successor to Diablo 2, but quickly grew into its own monstrous entity, confusing to the point that even following a build guide isn't a guarantee for success. It also offers some of the most complex build options with an expansive endgame of maps, tower defense, heists, and crafting, and some satisfying combat. A lot of time is needed to properly master it, and the meta is constantly shifting, but if other contemporary Diablo clones just aren't doing it, then Path of Exile may be the kind of madness you need. Tales of Arise. Bandai Namco's Tales series has offered some fantastic RPGs over the years, but Tales of Arise revamps things on a much larger scale. Massive fields to explore with fantastic visual fidelity and much higher budget cutscenes and skits between characters are the most noteworthy changes. And while the combat still relies on separate fields for battle and AG for arts, new mechanics like dodging, counter edge, boost attacks, and boost strikes change things up significantly. You'll be extending combos to quickly slay foes, employing boost attacks to create windows of opportunity, and much more. Bloodborne. A big departure from the Souls series, Bloodborne thrusts players into the world of Yharnam, with beastly humans, terrifying creatures, and cosmic horrors roaming about. The art design, music, and environments, not to mention the narrative, are all top-notch, but it's the combat that shines. Bloodborne is about aggression, whether you're using visceral attacks to deal massive damage or attacking to recover health, and the quicker pace led to some truly dynamic encounters, combined with a healthy selection of weapons and armor, excellent boss fights, and more. It's no wonder that Bloodborne is beloved to this day. Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Each of the Mass Effect titles is a great game in its own right, and the Legendary Edition collects them all while adding graphical improvements, quality of life changes, including much better handling of war assets and galactic readiness, and so on. Even the combat for the first game is improved with several guns and abilities receiving buffs, along with the ability to use any gun with any class. If you haven't experienced Commander Shepard's iconic battle against the Reapers with its amazing companions, side stories, set pieces, and decisions, then Mass Effect Legendary Edition is the ticket. Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Though the story devolved into a mess, Middle-earth: Shadow of War's combat still held up very well, leveling up Talion and having a wider range of skills to create havoc, loot, and collect, and huge sieges to unleash your arsenal upon was a blast. You could turn your foes deranged, which may also create maniacs, or ride a drake and rain fire down upon the opposition, among other things. The Nemesis system is also more robust as you manipulate orcs, partake in pit fights for loot, and create a venerable army to battle Sauron. Neo. Mixing Ninja Gaiden with some Souls-like mechanics and throwing in a loot grind, Neo was a new step for Team Ninja. The historical fantasy setting with yokai and iconic figures made for a unique experience, while the combat carved its own niche. On top of 3 different stances for attacking and unique abilities for each weapon, there were mechanics like Key Pulse to master, which incentivized controlled aggression. Even if its level layouts left something to be desired, Neo was a very welcome action RPG with a hefty campaign and extensive endgame. Horizon Zero Dawn. For all of the credit that Horizon Zero Dawn has received for its imaginative world, story, and presentation, it's the combat that ties everything together. Aloy starts out with a bow and arrow, but her arsenal quickly grows until you're wielding different bows, spears, rope launchers, and slingshots against foes, along with different ammo types. Each machine also presents an interesting challenge with unique weaknesses, whether it's grounding a Stormbird or systematically dismantling a Thunderjaw and using its weapons against it. That makes each encounter fun. Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact's combat starts out simple enough with light and charged attacks, unique abilities, and dashing. As the story progresses and the world of Teyvat opens up, the sheer amount of possibilities with elemental combos begin to open up. Damaging a foe and pyro and quickly switching to an arrow character to create a firestorm, dousing an enemy with hydro and then switching to electro for shocking are just some examples, and each character offers their own unique playstyles. CROSSCODE. Taking inspiration from retro action RPG classics like Terranigma and Secret of Mana, CROSSCODE masterfully establishes its own identity. Set in an MMO called Crossworlds, where the protagonist Leah has lost her memories and ability to speak, the player travels through various regions, taking on massive bosses and mastering the elements. On top of each element having its own unique purposes, there are some fiendish puzzles to solve across a variety of dungeons. All in all, it's a fantastic experience with lots of fun combat scenarios and a memorable story. Ys 9: Monstrum Nox. Falcom's games pre-Kuro no Kaseki haven't really been known for their graphical fidelity. But like Ys 8, Lacrimosa of Dana, Ys 9, Monstrum Nox makes up for this with ultra-tight combat, as everyone's favorite adventurer Adol finds himself a fugitive in a prison city of Baldug. Slaying foes is once again a priority. Split-second dodging and numerous abilities for each character, along with new traversal methods and the return of boost mode, also liven things up significantly. It may not break new ground in terms of storytelling or action, but it's very good in delivering that classic Ys-style action. NIER Automata. Enough has been said about the storyline, characterization, and sheer detail in NIER Automata, but the combat also deserves praise, combining the best aspects of Platinum Games' style, like Witch Time, with an excellent array of weapons and styles. Each character from 2B and 9S to A2 has their own unique gimmicks, and various set pieces provide great ways to utilize them. It's also great how one can customize their chip layout, opting for a crazy self-healing build or squeezing every last bit of damage in by removing the HUD and whatnot. Kingdom Hearts 3. Yes, the Darkseeker saga is almost incomprehensible to all outside of the fanbase. Nevertheless, Kingdom Hearts 3 is still a great action RPG, being easy to get into while having enough interesting hooks and gimmicks like shot lock, summons, keyblade transformations, keyblade switching, and more to keep a player invested. Though it starts out easy enough, the action ramps up quickly and soon you'll go up against a number of tough bosses. It's a trip, one that doesn't always make sense but manages to be fun and emotional all throughout. Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom. Taking place several hundreds of years after the first game, Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom sees the Prince Evan teaming up with Roland to establish a new kingdom. Combat-wise, this means entering into real-time battles with foes, and while various higgledies are applied for elemental attacks, magic and melee combat are also necessary, and feel incredibly responsive. Level 5 series has always stood out for its presentation, but the action is also incredibly solid. Monster Hunter World. Monster Hunter World wasn't just the latest iteration in the franchise with a huge budget and excellent visuals. It also marked a big shift in environmental design, as regions consisted of one big map without any loading screens between areas. Monsters were much more dynamic than ever, while each of the 14 weapon trees is equipped with new skills. The robust combat system also saw numerous improvements, both minor and major, making this a stellar jumping-on point for new players. Monster Hunter Rise. Available exclusively for the Nintendo Switch at launch, Monster Hunter Rise felt like a balance between the seamlessness of World's maps combined with the smaller scale of areas seen in Generations. Of course, it also introduced multiple new monsters, added several new moves for each weapon, and the Wire Bug, which could be used for both traversal and quick movement in combat. There's also the Rampage, providing some unique tower defense-based quests for players. Odin Sphere LEIFTHRASIR. The original Odin Sphere was acclaimed for its visuals, excellent combat, and storytelling, all presented in a 2D side-scrolling perspective with multiple playable characters. Odin Sphere LEIFTHRASIR further improves upon the classic, with even more options for combat like dodging, redesigned AI for enemies and bosses, revamped systems, more stages, and even additional foes. This is on top of the higher resolution visuals benefiting from the PS4's added power and having a chance to shine. The Division 2. Ubisoft Massive's looter-shooter sequel has been through a number of revamps since release, fundamentally changing its gear system, loot, progression, and much more over time. Nevertheless, the core gameplay with its cover-based tactical shooting and various gadgets, alongside the new specialist weapons, has always been fun. Add in some great missions, new dark zones, and the summit, a 100-story skyscraper with random floors, and you've got a fairly meaty experience. Demon's Souls. From Software's first Souls title kickstarted the franchise, and Bluepoint's recent remake on PS5 helped further cement its legacy. Taking place in the kingdom of Bolteria, one must navigate to several different Arkstones and defeat the bosses within, all for the sake of escaping from the Nexus. Gorgeous visuals, haptic feedback support, and zero loading times add on to the classic difficulty and compelling combat. NIER Replicant, version 1.224744871139. Another remake that recaptures the magic of the original is NIER Replicant, version 1.224744871139. Based on the Japanese release of NIER, which would be referred to as NIER Replicant, and featured a younger version of the protagonist, it's set in a world infected by the Black Scrawl and teeming with shades. Teaming up with bizarre allies and venturing the world to defeat the Shadow Lord, NIER Replicant version 1.224744871139 offers gorgeous revamped visuals and combat while maintaining the same emotional story. It even adds some new content, which series fans must experience. Fable 2. While the original couldn't quite deliver on all of its lofty promises, Fable 2 expanded on pretty much every single system in compelling ways. Different actions could potentially corrupt your character's appearance. Starting a family saw one's children potentially becoming adventurers, and pretty much every property could be purchased. The real-time combat also felt better with options like charge attacks, having your dog maul down foes, and unleashing devastating spells on foes. SCARLET NEXUS. It starts out unassuming enough, but Bandai Namco's SCARLET NEXUS quickly develops into one of the more insane titles of this year, both in terms of story and combat. Utilizing psychic powers to battle mutated beings called the Others, players can opt for Yuito's close combat slashing or Kasane's mid-range throwing knives, while pummeling foes with psychokinesis. Borrowing the abilities of different allies via the struggle arms system is also key, and enemies can be executed with powerful, over-the-top brain crush attacks for added flair. Nioh 2. While maintaining its predecessor's fundamental combat and gameplay, Nioh 2 adds on to it in numerous ways. New weapon types, revamped skill trees, yokai abilities, and burst counters that reward aggression, improved environments, and new types of loot to strive for. And of course, tons of tough new bosses can be expected. There's even more challenge to be had, but Nioh 2's combat is immensely rewarding, while presenting tons of new content, and that's before the endgame. Borderlands 3. I remarked before that Borderlands 2 had way more appeal from an endgame perspective than its successor. However, in terms of gameplay, Borderlands 3 is definitely superior. Gunplay is more responsive, and the sheer amount of weapon variety was bumped up considerably, guns turning into walking turrets being only one example. Each Vault Hunter is also way more complex, with each of their skill trees having more options and separate action skills. Say what you will about Mayhem Mode or the story, but the gunplay was top-notch. Torchlight 2. When everyone was still disappointed at Diablo 3's launch date, Runic Games' Torchlight 2 released to extensive fanfare, along with a brand new story and several distinct classes. It featured in-depth skill customization, a smattering of unique loot for each class, and a fairly robust endgame centered on grinding maps. Plus, it looked good and featured numerous awesome features, like sending your pet to town to sell unwanted loot and extensive mod support. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. One day, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 will be released. Until then, the original by Troika Games is still a compelling adventure. Starting out as a newly turned vampire, the player explores the seedy side of LA, choosing from one of 7 vampire clans, and focusing on 3 core stats to build their character. There's a lot of variety for inflicting hurt, whether it's boiling an enemy's blood, sneaking up and performing insta-kills, or relying on weapons like katanas, crossbows, and firearms. Having to preserve one's humanity is also key on top of navigating through the various intrigues of the Masquerade. Just make sure to download the fan-developed unofficial patch before diving in. And with that, we reached the end of the video. Have anything to say? Let us know in the comments below. Also, we upload new videos every single day on GamingBolt, so please consider subscribing as it really helps us out. Thanks for watching.